Hey everyone, today we're going to be making this necktie made completely out of granny squares, and it's pretty simple, so I'll walk through how to make and assemble the squares as well as the strap and loophole in the back. For the materials, I used 4 different colors of yarn to make my granny squares, so I used white, yellow, brown, and black as my main base color. And I recommend to use a cotton or fingering weight yarn to make the granny squares, but if you don't have it, acrylic yarn will work just as well for the tie. I also used some measuring tape, a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and a size 3 or 3.5 millimeter crochet hook. So here's an example swatch I made using a brown, yellow, black color combo, and the size of each square you make should measure about 2.5 by 2.5 inches. For this demo, I'll walk through how to make the yellow, white, and black color combo so it's easier to follow along and see the stitches. First, I'll make a magic ring. To make the magic ring, we'll wrap the yarn around 2 fingers, turn them around, and bring that strand of yarn and hold it with your pinky, creating an X. Then we'll insert our crochet hook underneath the right strand of yarn, and we'll pull the left strand underneath and scoop it up. Then we'll insert our crochet hook underneath the loop in the back, and we'll pull through the loop on our hook to create a chain. Then remove your fingers, and here's the magic circle. And we can tug on the longer tail of yarn to tighten the chain. Now, because we already did a chain, I'm going to work a chain 3. So I'll work 2 more chains, and that should equal 1, 2, and 3. Next, I'm going to work a double crochet. So yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now I have 2 double crochets, which includes the chain 3, and I'm going to go back in and work 1 more double crochet. And what I've made here is called a cluster, and a cluster contains 3 double crochets. After that, we will chain 2, and we'll go back in the circle and work a cluster of 3 double crochets. So yarn over, insert my crochet hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Again, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And I have 1 more. And I finished my second cluster of double crochets. Now we'll chain 2 again and work a 3rd cluster. So that's 1 double crochet, 2, and 3. So you should have 1, 2, and 3 clusters, and we're going to work 1 more, so chain 2, and work 3 more double crochets. After making your last cluster, pull on the tail of yarn to close the hole in the middle. Then we're going to chain 2, and we'll slip stitch into the 3rd chain of our beginning chain 3. So 1, 2, and 3, and I'll insert my crochet hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull that loop through the loop on the hook. This is the center section of our granny square, and if you haven't already, you can take the tail of yarn and pull on it gently to close the hole in the middle. Here's what it looks like, and you should have 4 spaces here. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we'll chain 1 and cut off the yarn. Pull that strand through with your crochet hook and tighten. For round 2, we're going to change our color to white. So I'll first create a slip knot with my white yarn. Grab your crochet hook and insert it inside the knot. Then grab your square and attach your yarn to any of the 4 corner spaces I'm inserting my hook into this space, pulling up a loop, and pull that loop through the loop on the hook to create a slip stitch. So now we'll start with our new color and we'll chain 3. And inside of that space that we have, this little gap here, we're going to work a cluster of 3. So I'll start by working a double crochet, and I'm carrying this little tail of yarn with me as I go. So I pulled up a loop in that space, yarn over, pulled through 2, yarn over, pulled through 2. So I have 2 double crochets now, and I'll tighten with that little tail. So I'll make 1 more double crochet to complete my cluster. So yarn over, insert the hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So here is the cluster of 3. Then we'll chain 2, and we'll go back into the same space that we worked into and work another 3 double crochets. So that's my first one. This is my second, and we'll do 1 more inside of that same space. And you can see it's starting to form a little corner on this right side. And after doing that, we'll move on to the next space. So we'll just skip over that cluster of 3, and in the next space we'll work another 6 double crochets. So first remember to do the cluster of 3, then chain 2, and go back in and work another 3 double crochets. We'll repeat the same steps in our next space. We'll skip right over this cluster of 3 yellow, and in this gap we'll work another 2 clusters. So there's 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and back in the same space we'll work another 3 double crochets. I have 1 more space left, so I'll work my last 2 clusters inside of that space. I finished my last cluster of 3, and you can see that there's little petals and spaces forming around our square. We can slip stitch to the 3rd chain in our starting chain 3. Insert your hook into that top chain and slip stitch to join. We've completed the 2nd round, and to begin the 3rd round we won't cut off the yarn, but to attach our next color we're going to walk over to this space. So in this next stitch over, I'm going to work a slip stitch, and in the following stitch I'm going to work another slip stitch, when you reach this space, we'll insert our crochet hook, pull up a loop, but don't pull the loop through. We'll drop our work, take the black yarn, and we're going to attach it by looping it onto our hook and pulling through those 2 white loops. And we can use our white yarn to tighten so that that black yarn is secure. And now we'll take our scissors to snip off the white yarn. And with my black yarn, we're going to start round 3. And to make it a little bit easier so we don't have too many strands to sew, I'm just going to carry my white tail of yarn as I go. So to start, I'm working a chain 3, and I'm tightening this yarn just a bit more. Now we'll work a cluster of 3, so I'll work 2 double crochets inside of this chain space, and this should be my first cluster of 3, which includes that chain 3 we made and the 2 double crochets. Then we'll chain 2 and work back into the same space and work another 3 double crochets. And our next space is going to be in the middle. So if you open this up, you can see that there's a space in the middle here, and we're going to work just a cluster of 3 inside of those spaces. So instead of 6 double crochets, we'll work just 3 inside of the middle space. So here's my first double crochet, and remember to carry your yarn as you go. This is the second double crochet, and I have one more in this space. So that's all we'll do for each of the middle spaces, and for the next corner space we're going to repeat what we did for the other corners. So we'll start with a cluster of 3, chain 2, and back in that same space we'll work a cluster of 3. And in this next middle section we'll work 3 double crochets. And in the next corner we'll do the cluster of 3, 2, 3, chain 2, and go back in and work another 3 double crochets. So this will be the pattern for the remainder of round 3. I'll keep this clip running so you can follow along. For each of the middle spaces, we'll just work 3 double crochets, and every corner will be our cluster of 3, chain 2, and cluster of 3. So you should be ending with the last 3 double crochets in that middle space, and we're going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain in our chain 3. So insert your hook into the top of the chain 3 and slip stitch to join. This completes our 2.5 by 2.5 inches granny square. So I'll chain 1 to fasten off. Pull the strand through with your hook and tighten. If I match this up with the other granny square I made, it's approximately the same size. For the tie that I'm making, you'll need a total of 15 of these squares. So you'll just repeat that pattern for 15 squares. And when you're done each square, you can weave in the loose ends. So with my yarn needle, I'm weaving in each loose end with its matching color. So with this yellow yarn, I'm going to weave it in to a few stitches in the back, pull the yarn through. You can do this as many times as you'd like until you feel that the strands are somewhat hidden. And I'm doing this with each strand and tying a knot where I can and snipping it off with my scissors. If you're not a fan of weaving in loose ends, or if this part is too time consuming, then you can skip it and choose to snip off each strand of yarn instead. The reason we want to hide it is because when we form our tie, we don't want any of these loose strands to stick out since they are granny squares. Here's what my square looks like, and I don't have anything poking out, so this is how it should appear. For this next part, we'll work on making a half granny square, which is just a triangle. So we'll begin with a magic ring. So I have my X formation and I'm inserting my crochet hook, pulling that left strand underneath, then inserting my hook underneath the strand in the back and pulling through to chain. So I have one chain and I'm going to work 3 more chains for a total of 4 chains. So once you have 4 chains, we're going to yarn over and work 3 double crochets inside of the magic ring. So that's my first one, this is my second one, and this is the third. After 3 double crochets, we'll chain 2 and work another 3 double crochets inside of the circle. Next, chain 1 and work 1 double crochet inside the circle. And to close this hole in the center, we'll tug on the tail of yarn and tighten to fully close it. So that's the end of our first round, and now we're going to chain 4, turn our work, should look like this, and there's a little gap or space here, and inside of that space we're going to work a cluster of 3 double crochets. So here's my first, here's my second, and here's my third. So I did 3 double crochets, then we will chain 1 and skip over to this top space here and work a cluster of 3 double crochets. Then we'll chain 2 and work another 3 double crochets in this top space. So that will create the top part of our triangle, and you'll see it start to form a pointy edge. And after we do that, we'll chain 1 and work 3 double crochets inside of this corner space. So there's 1, 2, 3, chain 1 and work 1 double crochet in that space. So here's what it should look like so far. And for my final round, I'm going to chain 4 again, turn my work, and inside of this corner space, I'm going to work 3 double crochets, chain 1, and we should have a middle space now, and we'll work 3 double crochets inside of this middle section, chain 1, and in the top of my triangle I'm going to work a cluster of 3, chain 2, and work a cluster of 3 in that same space. Then we'll chain 1, and in this middle space I'll work 3 double crochets. Then we're going to chain 1, and in this last corner we're going to work 3 double crochets. Chain 1 and go back in and work 1 more double crochet. And that will complete the last round. Now we'll chain 1 and fasten off. Cut off the yarn and pull through to tighten. And here's what the half triangle looks like. And you'll want to make a total of 6 triangles that we'll use to form the edges of the tie. Here's how you should arrange it after finishing the 15 squares and 6 triangles. Because I did 3 different color combos and 5 squares for each, I mixed up how I wanted them to be placed. So I have the same color combo running along the middle, and surrounding it are the squares and the 6 triangles that I've created. Once everything is sewn together, we'll take both ends and fold them, and this is going to form a tie shape. To sew the squares, I'm going to attach some black yarn in one of the corners of my squares. So pull that through the space and tie a knot. And ideally you want to attach a really long strand of black yarn so we can use it to sew multiple squares together without having to reattach. But if you do run out, you can always just attach more. So after that, I'll take my 2 squares and I'm going to line it up so that I'm sewing from right to left. So the yarn I just attached will be on my right side, and I'm going to insert my yarn needle into this corner space in the top square and into the bottom corner of my other square, and I'll pull that yarn needle through to connect both of these squares. And there won't be perfect stitches to work into, so just try your best to go through 2 strands of yarn and out through 2 strands of yarn on the other side. So I'm just going through and weaving in, starting from the top and going into the bottom. And we'll repeat this weaving technique, which is called a whip stitch, until we reach the corners of the squares. And you want to do your best to line it up so that it looks even once they're sewn together. And when you're sewing, you can also work through the little spaces that are in our granny square if it's hard to pick up the loops in that section. I'm at the corner spaces and I'm working through these corner stitches and pulling the yarn needle through to close that gap. So I've connected both of these squares, and we can continue to sew the remaining squares together. And the order you sew the squares doesn't matter as long as it's following the arrangement that I showed in the beginning. So I'm continuing to sew, and I'm doing this in sections so it's a little easier to connect everything. And I had to attach more yarn at a couple of points, so there's a lot of loose strands still remaining that I'll be weaving in at the very end once all the squares are sewn together. To sew the triangles, we're going to repeat the same process, so I'll attach one triangle to show you. So I'm going to start on this flip side. Since I have a lot of loose strands, it's just easier to keep all the mess on one side. I'm attaching more black yarn, tying a knot, and inserting my sewing needle, and continuing the same pattern to weave the triangles. So I'm working from the top of the project to the bottom. So I'm going in from these top loops, inserting into the bottom, picking up 2 loops, and pulling through. And you want to make sure the loose strands are not poking out on the other side. So try to keep them, so you can try to weave them in as you're sewing, or you can do it all at the end. So the way the triangle is lining up is this corner should match up with that corner section of my square, and then we'll work all the way down. When you reach the corner, we'll go through that corner stitch and through the corner space of the triangle and pull through, and we'll work down along the other side of the triangle. I'm at the corner and just going through those final 2 stitches to connect the triangle. So here's what it looks like when we flip it over on the other side. And after sewing squares and triangles together, we can secure the loose ends by working through a few stitches in the project and cutting off the yarn. I've sewn all the squares and triangles together, and here's what it looks like vertically. Now we're going to turn this over and fold both ends so that they meet in the center. And you'll notice that some sections don't line up perfectly when you fold it in half, and they are going to overlap each other, but we'll continue to sew along where it overlaps. So I'm going to take some black yarn and attach it to this top part of the tie, and we can tie a knot to secure the yarn in place. I'll tuck that in the inside, and to sew this together, we're going to insert our yarn needle from the 2 loops on the top section and pull it through 2 loops on the bottom section where both ends meet, and pull the yarn through. Our sewing technique here will be the same as when we sewed the granny squares together. So I'm working from the top and pulling out from the bottom 2 strands. And once again, there won't be perfect stitches to work into, so try your best to pick up 1 or 2 loops on both ends and sew that together. And we'll sew until we reach the end of this first section. I'll insert my yarn needle through a few stitches to weave it in. And I'm wrapping this yarn around twice and pulling through to create a knot. And then we're just going to cut off the yarn. So this is what the back of the tie looks like at the top. So that little space that creates a diamond, we're going to leave that alone. And now we'll work on sewing the middle section together. So we'll attach more yarn like we did in the beginning. Tie a knot. Continue to sew the middle ends together. I'm at the end of that middle section, and I've reached the area where the granny squares overlap a little bit, so I'm going to work into this last 2 stitches on both ends. And to sew the overlap section together, it can be a little tricky. I didn't fully cover both of the squares. I just left the square touching the halfway point where that brown section is, and sewing along the middle there. So I'm working through these petals and just pulling through the other side. And if you don't like this because it's too bunched up, then you can sew the edges of the squares together, but I found that it looked a little too wide at the bottom of the tie when I did that. So I just decided to overlap it a little bit like this, and it didn't look too weird at the bottom of the tie. And the sewed section will always be in the back, so nobody will see it anyway when you wear the tie. So I've reached the very end, and now I'm just going to weave in that black yarn in the inside of the project. So I'm working up to a few stitches, weaving that in and cutting it off. Here's what the tie looks like from the back after sewing down the middle. And the part where it overlapped doesn't look too bad. It's just two squares kind of merged together. To start the strap of the tie, we're going to attach yarn at the top. And this section is open, but we'll be closing that as we start working on our rows. To attach the yarn, I created a slip knot and inserting my crochet hook into this corner. Pull that loop through the corner, and we're going to chain one. And I'm tucking in this tail in the inside. We're going to single crochet by inserting into 2 loops on one end and out 2 loops on the other, and yarn over, pull through 2. So I'm inserting from one end and inserting out in the V on the other end and creating a single crochet. And I'll do this along the top until I have a total of 10 double crochets. So that top hole is now sewn closed, and I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and we'll work a single crochet in each stitch all the way across. I'm at the end of the row, and we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and continue working single crochet rows until we reach 10.5 inches. I've reached the 10.5 inches mark from the first single crochet row that I did, and now we're going to start decreasing. So to decrease, we'll chain 1, turn our work, and to work a decrease, we're going to single crochet 2 together. So I'm going to insert my crochet hook into the first stitch, pull up a loop, and then we're going to go into the stitch next to it, pull up a loop, and we'll yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook. We'll single crochet until we have 2 stitches remaining in the row. When there's 2 stitches left, we'll insert our crochet hook, pull up a loop, and insert into the final stitch, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. So that is my second single crochet 2 together. And then I'll chain 1, turn my work, and work regular rows of single crochet until I reach a certain point of the tie strap. So continue working these rows until the tie measures 56.5 to 57 inches from the bottom to the top. And here I did 2 more rows of decreases at the end of the tie strap, and now I can chain 1 and fasten off. And I'll weave in my loose end through a few stitches. When you're finished, you can cut off the yarn. For the final part of the tie, we need to make the keeper hole in the back. So I'm measuring the width, and it's about 3 inches. So I'm going to chain until the width of my chain reaches about that 3-inch length. So for me, that was a total of 15 chains. For the first row of our keeper loop, we're going to work half double crochet stitches. So yarn over, insert your crochet hook into the second chain from the hook, going under both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Half double crochet in each chain until the end of the row. We finished row 1, and to begin row 2, we'll chain 2, turn our work, and work a half double crochet in each stitch for the next 2 rows. After 2 rows, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and we're going to work a single crochet all around this rectangle. So I'm inserting a single crochet in each stitch. And as you're approaching the end of the row, we're going to turn so it's vertical, and we're going to work single crochets at the top of this rectangle. So this will add a nice border around the keeper loop. And if we turn again, we can work single crochets at the bottom of this rectangle. And there won't be perfect stitches to work into, so just make sure you're picking up 2 loops as you're going into each space. And when you make it all the way around, we can slip stitch into our first single crochet stitch to close it off, and then we'll chain 1 and fasten off. Leave a long tail behind that we can use to sew the keeper loop on the back of the strap. I'm positioning my keeper loop on the bottom third of the tie, and I'm sewing along the sides of the rectangle. So I'm inserting my sewing needle into the tie and pulling out through 2 loops on my rectangle. And we'll do this along the edge of the rectangle. And when you're finished, we can weave in the tail by working into the tie through a few stitches and pulling through. So I'm going up and then back down to create and secure a knot. Then we can cut that off and reattach our yarn to repeat the same steps on the other side of the strap. So I'm just attaching my yarn here and tying a knot, threading the yarn through my yarn needle, and continuing to sew along the side of the strap. When you're finished, you can cut off the yarn, and here's what the keeper loop looks like. Here's what the final granny square tie looks like, and if you ended up making this, I'd love to know what color combinations you chose and how it came out. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel, and I'll see you next time.